Laborers were ripping up the wooden sidewalks, changing round cobblestones to square ones, installing gas street lights, digging ditches for sewers and telephone lines. The bowels of the city were being rearranged. Sometimes, when Yasha opened his eyes, it seemed to him that the droshky was about to sink into the sandy depths. The earth seemed about to collapse, toppling the buildings. All Warsaw appeared on the verge of suffering the fate of Sodom and Gomorrah. How could he decide anything now? The droshky rolled past the synagogue on Gnoya Street. When was I here? He asked himself in confusion. Was it today? Yesterday? The 2 days blended into one. His praying there in prayer shawl and phylacteries, the piety which had possessed him, were alien now, dreamlike. What sort of power possessed me? My nerves must be completely shattered. The droshky pulled up to Amelia's house, and Yasha handed the driver a gulden instead of the usual 20-groschen fare. The coachman offered him change, but Yasha waved it away. He's a pauper, he thought. Let him keep the extra 10 groschen. Every good deed would boost his standing with heaven. Slowly he mounted the steps, his foot now causing him less discomfort. He rang the bell, and Jadwiga answered the door. She smiled and said confidentially, "The mistress is expecting you. Has been since yesterday." "What's new around here?" "Not a thing." "Oh, yes, there was something. Pan Yasha may remember my telling him about old Zarushki and his deaf servant maid, the one who's my friend. Well, they had a robbery there yesterday." Yasha's mouth became dry. "Did they steal the treasure?" "No. The thief got panicky and ran away. Leaped from the balcony. The night watchman saw him. Don't ask what's going on over there. The old man raised a terrible fuss. It was just awful. He wanted to discharge my friend. The police came. My friend cried her heart out. 30 years in one household." She said all this with a sort of perverse pleasure. Her friend's misfortune gave Jadwiga some sort of inner satisfaction. Her eyes sparkled with a malice that Yasha had not seen in her before. "Yes, there are no lack of thieves in Warsaw. Ah, there's that fortune to tempt them. Kindly go into the drawing-room. I'll announce you to the mistress." It seemed to Yasha that Jadwiga had grown younger. She did not walk now, but almost skipped along. He went into the drawing-room and seated himself on the sofa. "They mustn't notice anything wrong with my foot. If they do, I'll claim that I fell. Or perhaps it would be better for me to mention it right off. It would seem less suspicious that way." Yasha had expected Amelia to come running to him immediately, but she took longer than usual. "She's repaying me for last night," he thought. At last he heard footsteps. Amelia opened the door, and Yasha saw that she was once again dressed in a brightly colored gown. This one evidently new. He rose, but did not go immediately to her. "What a marvelous dress! Do you like it?" "It's splendid. Turn around. Let me see it from the back." Amelia did as she was told, and Yasha availed himself of the moment to limp closer to her. "Yes, exquisite." She turned to face him. "I was afraid it wouldn't please you. What happened to you yesterday? I didn't sleep at all last night because of you." "What did you do then if you didn't sleep?" "What can you do at such a time? I read, I walked about. Really, I was most concerned about you. I thought that you'd already—" Amelia broke off. How could she have been reading when there was no light in her bedroom, Yasha thought. He wanted to confront her with this, but restrained himself, aware that by such a confrontation he would give himself away. She studied him, her face expressing curiosity, resentment, devotion. Through some imperceptible power, or omen, he knew that she regretted having repulsed him the other night, and that she was now prepared to rectify her error. She wrinkled her brow as if attempting to fathom his thoughts. He studied her, and it seemed to him that she had aged, not by days, but by years, as sometimes happens to a person who has suffered a grave illness or a deep sorrow. "Something bad happened yesterday," he said. Her face blanched. "What?" "While I was rehearsing, I fell and injured my foot." "I sometimes wonder that you survive at all," she said reproachfully. "You undertake the superhuman. Even if you are blessed with talent, you don't have to squander it, especially at the wages you are paid. They don't appreciate you at all." "Yes, I do give too much, but that's my nature." Well, it's both a curse and a blessing. Have you seen a doctor? Not yet. What are you waiting for? You're opening in a few days. Yes, I know that. Sit down. I knew there was something wrong. You were supposed to come and you didn't. I didn't know why, but I couldn't sleep. I woke at 1 o'clock and didn't shut my eyes again. I had this odd sensation that you were in danger. She suddenly addressed him with the familiar thou. I told myself that my fears were ridiculous. I didn't want to be superstitious, but I couldn't rid myself of that feeling. When did it happen? At what time did you fall? As a matter of fact, it was during the night. At 1 o'clock? Around then. I knew it, although I can't imagine how. I sat up in bed and for no reason at all began to pray for you. Halina woke up too and came in. There's something about that girl which defies explanation. There's a strange sort of bond between us. When I can't sleep, she can't either, although I am very careful not to make any noise. What happened? Was it a jump? Yes, I jumped. You must see a doctor immediately, and if he says not to perform, you must listen to him. You can't trifle with such things, especially in your case. The theater will go bankrupt. Let it. No one is immune to accidents. If only we were already together, I would take care of you. You don't look at all well. Did you get a haircut? No. You look as if you'd had a haircut. I know you'll think this ridiculous, but for days I've had a premonition of this. You mustn't worry. I foresaw no tragedy, but there was certainly something. I tried to keep my spirits up. When I had no word from you this morning, I felt simply desperate. I even thought of going to your place. How can such things be explained? You can't explain anything. May I see your foot? Later, not now. All right, dearest. But there is something important I must discuss with you. What is it? Tell me. We must make some definite plans. Perhaps what I'm saying is in bad taste, but we are neither of us children anymore. It's come to the point where I cannot endure this waiting any longer, this feeling of everything being up in the air. I'm not an irresponsible person by nature. I must know exactly where I stand. Halina must resume her schooling. She cannot afford to lose another semester. You make thousands of promises, but everything remains as before. Now that you've revealed our intentions to Halina, she gives me no peace. She's a clever girl, but a child remains a child. I know I shouldn't be speaking like this to you when you're in pain, but I can't impress upon you too strongly just what I've been going through. In addition to everything else, I long for you terribly. The moment we say goodbye and I close the door, my torment begins. I feel strangely insecure, as if I were on an ice floe which might crack at any moment and cast me into the water. I start to believe that I've grown vulgar and have lost all shame. And Amelia ceased her flow of words. She stood there, her head bowed, trembling, her eyes cast down as if she were ashamed to her very core. Do you mean physically? Yasha asked after some hesitation. Everything together. Well, we'll decide everything. Subchapter 6. You tell me each time that we'll decide. Is there so much that needs deciding? If we intend to go, I must give up my apartment and sell the furniture. I might get something for it, although it isn't worth much anymore. But maybe we can send it on to Italy. Those are the practical things that we must do. Nothing will come from just talking. We should also apply for passports, because the Russians make everything difficult. We should determine the exact week and day of our departure. There's also the matter of finances. I haven't discussed this with you previously, because the subject is extremely distasteful to me. Whenever I have to speak of it, the blood rushes to my face. Her face indeed reddened. But we can accomplish nothing without it. We also spoke of your... Well, you did promise to assume the Christian faith. I know that these things are mere formalities. One does not acquire faith by being sprinkled with water. But without it, we cannot marry. I'm saying all this to you on the assumption that your promises were given in good faith. If they were not, why continue the farce? We're no longer children. And Amelia stopped talking. You know I meant every word I said. I know nothing. What do I know about you anyway? There are times when I feel I don't even know myself. When I used to hear of this sort of thing, I always blamed the other woman. You do have a wife, after all, although God knows you're not faithful to her, and your whole conduct generally is that of a man who is footloose. I am sinning, too, but I am true to my church. From the Catholic point of view, when someone is converted to our faith, he is reborn, and all his prior relationships are nullified. I neither know your wife, nor do I want to. Another thing, yours is a childless marriage. A marriage without children is like only half a marriage. I am not young anymore either, but I can still have a baby, and I would like to bear your children. You'll laugh, but even Helena spoke of it. She once said, "When you marry Uncle Yasha, I should like a little brother. A man with your talents must not die without leaving an heir. Mazur is a good Polish name." Yasha was sitting on the sofa, Amelia opposite him in a chaise longue. He looked at her, and she looked back at him. He realized suddenly that he could put things off no longer. The words that he had to say must be uttered this very instant, but he had not yet determined what to say, or how to act. "Amelia, there's something I must tell you," he began. "Say it. I'm listening." "Amelia, I have no money. My entire fortune consists of the house in Lublin, but I cannot take that from her." Amelia considered this for a moment. "Why didn't you say anything before this? Your manner implied that money was not the problem." "I always felt that I could get it at the last minute. If the opening proved successful, there was always the possibility that I could perform abroad. There are always foreign theater owners here. You'll pardon me, but our plan was something else altogether. How could you be sure you'd find employment in Italy? They might sign you for France or the United States. It would be strange if we were married and you had to be in one place and Helena and I in another. She must remain for a time in southern Italy. A winter in England, for example, would kill her. Besides, you planned to take a year off and study European languages. If you travel about Europe without knowing the languages, they will treat you no better than they do here in Poland. You're forgetting everything that we decided. We planned to buy a house with a garden near Naples. That was our plan. I don't mean to reprove you in any way, but if you wish to better your situation, you must follow a precise plan. This business of living from day to day, extempore, as you theatrical people put it, has brought you nothing but trouble. You've admitted that yourself." "Yes, it's true, but I must get my hands on some money. How much would all this cost? I mean, what's the very minimum?" "We've gone over all that already. We would need at least 15,000 rubles. Anything over would be that much better." "I'll just have to get the money." "How? As far as I know, it doesn't rain rubles in Warsaw. It was my impression that you'd already accumulated the required capital." "No, I have nothing." "Well, that's that. You mustn't think my feelings towards you have changed because of this. But our plans obviously cannot remain the same. I've already notified some of the people close to me that I'm about to go abroad. Helena can't remain at home forever. A girl her age must go to school. Besides, you and I cannot be together here. It would be senseless for both of us. You have a family, and who knows what else. As it is, I'm losing sleep because of the sympathy I feel for your wife. But if I were to leave the country, she would seem remote. To steal a husband from a wife and take a chance that she might come crying to me would be too much." And she shook her head negatively to stress her refusal. She shuddered at the same time. "I'll get the money." "How? Will you rob a bank?" Helena entered. "Ah, Uncle Yasha!" Amelia looked up. "How many times have I told you to knock before you come in? You're not a 3-year-old. If I've interrupted anything, I'll go." "You didn't interrupt a thing," Yasha said. "What a lovely dress you're wearing." "What's so nice about it? A dress I've outgrown. But it's white, and I adore white. I should like our house in Italy to be white. Why can't the roof be white, too? Oh, it would be gorgeous, a house with a white roof." "Perhaps you'd like the chimney sweep to be all in white, too," Yasha teased. "Why not? It's possible to make soot white. I read that when a new pope is chosen, white smoke comes out of the chimney at the Vatican, and if the smoke is white, the soot can be white as well." "Yes, everything will be arranged for you, but right now go back to your room. We are in the midst of discussing things," Amelia said. "What are you talking about? Don't frown so, Mother. I'm leaving right away. I'm terribly thirsty, but that isn't important. Before I go, there's only one thing that I want to say. You seem in a bad humor, Uncle Yasha. What's wrong? I've lost a boatload of sour milk. What? What sort of comic expression is that? It's a Yiddish saying. I should like to know Yiddish. I would like to know all the languages. Chinese, Tataric, Turkish. It's said that animals have a language of their own, too. I once passed Grzybov Place, and the Jews looked so funny with their long caftans and black beards. What's a Jew? I've told you to get out of here. Amelia's voice rose. Helena turned to go just as there was a knock on the door. Jadwiga stood at the threshold. There's a man here. He wishes to speak with the mistress. A man? Who is he? What does he want? I don't know. Why didn't you ask his name? He wouldn't say. He looks like he's from the post office or something. Well, another pest. 1 second. I'll go out to see him. And Amelia went out into the corridor. Who can that be? Helena asked. I took a book out of the school library and lost it. Actually, I didn't lose it at all. It fell into the sewer, and I was too disgusted to pick it up. I was afraid to bring it home, because if Mama saw me with such a filthy book, she would scold me terribly. She is good, but very bad, too. Lately, she's been acting strangely. She doesn't sleep nights, and when she can't sleep, I can't sleep either. I get in bed with her, and we lie there and talk like two lost souls. Occasionally, she sits at a little table, puts her hands on it, and waits for the table to predict her future. Oh, she is funny sometimes, but I love her madly. In the middle of the night, she is so good. At times, I wish it were always in the middle of the night, and that you, Uncle Yasha, were together with us, and we all passed the time together. Maybe you'd like to hypnotize me now. I feel a strong desire to be hypnotized. What do you need it for? Oh, just because. Life is so dreary. Subchapter 7. Your mother doesn't want me to, and I won't do something she opposes. Just make it last until she returns. It doesn't happen that quickly. Anyway, you are hypnotized. Whatever do you mean? Ah, you are compelled to love me. You will always love me. You will never forget me. That's true. Never. I should like to talk nonsense. May I talk nonsense, so long as Mama is out of the room? Yes, go on. Why isn't everybody like you, Uncle Yasha? Everyone else is so pompous and full of self-importance. I love Mama. I love her terribly, but there are times when I hate her. When she gets into a bad mood, she takes it out on me. Don't go here. Don't stand there. Once I broke a flower pot, quite unintentionally, and she didn't speak to me the whole day. That night I dreamt that an omnibus, horses, conductors, passengers, and all, was driving through our apartment. I was puzzled in my dream. Why would an omnibus ride through our apartment? Where were all the people bound? And how had the omnibus got through the doorway? But it just simply rode by and made stops, and I thought, when Mama comes home and sees this, she will raise a terrible fuss. I had to laugh, and I woke up laughing. I must laugh now, too, at that foolish dream. But is it my fault? I dream about you, too, Uncle Yasha. But since you are mean and won't hypnotize me, I shan't tell you about the dream. What do you dream about me? I won't tell you. My dreams are all either comical or just plain crazy. You're liable to think I'm mad. It's just awful, the thoughts that come to me. I want to drive them away, but I can't. What kind of thoughts? I can't tell you that. You don't have to hide anything from me. I love you. Oh, you only say so. Actually, you are my enemy. Maybe you are even a devil who's assumed human form. Perhaps you have horns and a tail like the Baba Yaga. Yes, I do have horns. And Yasha put 2 fingers up to his head. Don't do that. It frightens me. I'm an awful coward. At night, I'm simply terrified. I'm afraid of ghosts, evil spirits, all that sort of thing. A neighbor of ours had a 6-year-old daughter, Janinka, a pretty child with blonde curls and blue eyes like a cherub. All of a sudden, she caught scarlet fever and died. Mama didn't want me to find out, but I knew everything. I even saw through the window how they carried out her coffin. A tiny coffin, decorated with flowers. Oh, death is horrible. I don't think about it during the day, but when it gets dark, I begin to think about it. Amelia came in. she looked from Yasha to Halina and remarked, "Well, aren't you a fine pair?" "Who was the stranger?" Yasha inquired, surprised at his audacity. "If I told you, you would laugh, although it's no laughing matter. We have an acquaintance who lives close by, a wealthy old man named Zaruski, a usurer, a miser. He is actually not even an acquaintance, but Jadwiga is friendly with his servant, and because of that, he's begun to greet me. Last night someone broke into his house. The thief came by way of the balcony, and a night watchman saw him descend. The watchman chased him, but the man got away. He didn't manage to open the safe. It now seems he left a notebook with the addresses of other apartments he planned to rob, and my address was included among them. A detective was just here to warn me. I told him plainly there isn't much he can steal here. Isn't that strange?" Yasha's palate became dry. Why would he leave a list of addresses behind? He apparently lost it. "Well, you will have to be careful." "How can anyone be careful? Warsaw has become a nest of thieves. Halina, go to your room." Halina rose languorously. "All right, I'm going." "What we talked about must remain a secret," she said to Yasha. "Yes, an eternal secret." "Well, I'll be going. What other choice have I if I'm driven out? But you're not leaving yet, Uncle Yasha." "No, I'll stay a while." "Goodbye." "Goodbye." "Au revoir." "Au revoir." "Arrivederci." "Hurry up," Amelia snapped. "Well, I'm going." And Halina walked out. "What secrets does she have with you?" Amelia asked, half in jest. "Momentous secrets." "There are times when I regret not having had a son instead of a daughter. A boy isn't home as much, nor does he mix into his mother's affairs. I love her, but she sometimes upsets me. You must keep in mind that she's a child, not a grown-up. I speak to her as to a child. That's odd about that thief. Couldn't he find a richer household than mine? Where do people obtain their information? They evidently go through the gates and read the directories. But I'm afraid of thieves. A thief can easily be a murderer, too. The front door has a padlock, but the door leading to the balcony has only a chain. You're on the second floor. That's too high for prowlers." "True. How did you know that Zaruski lived on the first floor?" "Because I am the thief," Yasha said hoarsely, shocked himself at the words he uttered. His throat contracted. Darkness rose before his eyes, and again he saw the fiery sparks. It was as if a Dybbuk had spoken within him. A tingle zigzagged down his spine. Once more he felt the nausea which precedes fainting. Amelia paused a moment. "Well, it's a good idea. Since you can climb down from the windows, you should be able to climb up a balcony." "I can indeed." "What's that? I didn't hear you." "I said I can indeed." "Well, why didn't you open the safe? Once you begin something, you ought to finish it." "Sometimes you can't." "Why are you speaking so softly? I can't make out what you are saying." "I said sometimes you can't. If one can't, one shouldn't try, according to the old proverb." "Funny. Just a short while ago I was thinking that thieves could break into his apartment. Everyone knows he keeps his money on the premises. Sooner or later it must be stolen. That's the fate of all misers." "Well, but the accumulation of wealth is in itself a passion." "A sort of passion." "What's the difference? In the absolute sense, perhaps all passions are either totally foolish or completely wise. What do any of us know?" "No, we know nothing." They were both quiet, and now at last she broke the silence. "What's the matter with you? I must take a look at your foot." "Not now, not now." "Why not now?" "How did you fall? Tell me." She doesn't believe me. She thinks I'm joking, Yasha thought. Well, everything's lost anyway. He looked at Amelia, but he saw her as if through a mist. It was dark in the room. The windows faced to the north and were overhung by wine-colored drapes. A strange indifference came over him, the sort of indifference that comes when one is about to commit a crime or risk one's life. He knew that what he was about to say would destroy everything, but he did not care. He heard himself saying, "I hurt my foot jumping from Zarushki's balcony." Amelia raised her brows. "Really, this is hardly the time for jokes." "It's the absolute truth." Subchapter 8. In the silence that followed, he could hear the chirping of the birds on the other side of the window. Well, the worst is over, he said to himself. He understood his objective now, to put a finish to the whole affair. He had taken upon himself too heavy a burden. He needed to cut himself loose from everything. He glanced towards the door as if prepared to flee without a parting word. He did not lower his eyes, but looked squarely at Amelia, not with pride, but with the fear of one who cannot allow himself the luxury of fear. Amelia looked back at him, not angrily, but with that sort of curiosity mixed with scorn, which one feels seeing the futility of all one's endeavor. She looked as if she were restraining herself from laughter. "Really, I don't believe—" "Yes, it's the truth. I was in front of your house last night. I even wanted to call up to you. But instead you went there? I didn't want to wake Halina and Jadwiga. I'm hoping that you are only teasing me. You know I'm gullible, easily taken in." "No, I'm not teasing. I heard Jadwiga speak of him, and I thought this would be a solution to our problem. But I panicked. I'm apparently not cut out for that sort of thing." "You've come to confess to me, is that it?" "You asked me." "What did I ask?" "Oh, but it's all the same, all the same. If this isn't one of your games, I can only pity you. That is, both of us. If it is a joke, I have only contempt for you. I didn't come here to play games. Who can tell what you would or wouldn't do? You are obviously not a normal person." "No. I just read of a woman who let herself be seduced by a madman." "You are the woman." Amelia's eyes narrowed. "That is my lot. Stefan, may he rest in peace, was likewise a psychopath, of another type. Apparently I'm drawn to that kind of man. You mustn't blame yourself. You are the noblest woman I ever met." "Whom have you met? You stem from offal, and you are offal. Pardon my harsh words, but I am only stating a fact. The blame is mine alone. I was aware of everything. Actually, you concealed nothing. But in the Greek drama there is a sort of fate— no, it has another name— wherein a person sees everything that will befall him, but must fulfill his destiny nevertheless. He sees the pit, but falls into it anyhow. You are not yet in the pit. I cannot be deeper in the pit than I am. If you had one spark of manhood in you, you would have spared me this final disgrace. You could have gone and never come back. I wouldn't have sent an emissary after you. At least I would have had a memory." "I'm sorry." "Don't be sorry. You told me you were married. You even admitted that Magda was your mistress. You also told me that you are an atheist, or however you put it. If I could accept all this, there's no reason for me to fear a thief. It's only amusing that you should prove such an inept thief." And Amelia emitted a sort of chuckle. "I might still prove to be a good one." "Thank you for the promise. I just don't know what to tell Halina." Amelia changed her tone. "I hope you realize you must go away and never return, and you must not write either. As far as I'm concerned, you're dead. I, too, am dead. But the dead have their milieu also." "Yes, I'll go. Rest assured that I will never—" And Yasha made a motion as if to rise. "Wait. I see that you can't even get up. What have you done to yourself? Sprained your ankle? Fractured your foot?" "I did something to it. Whatever it was, you won't perform any more this season. Possibly you've crippled yourself for life. You must have some sort of covenant with God, since he punished you directly on the spot." "I'm just a bungler." Amelia covered her face with her hands. She bent her head. She appeared to be considering something deeply. She even massaged her forehead with her fingertips. When she removed her hand, Yasha saw, to his amazement, a transformed face. In so few seconds, Amelia had changed. Pouches had appeared beneath her eyes. She resembled someone who had just awakened from a short, deep sleep. Even her hair was disarranged. He detected wrinkles in her forehead and white in her hair. As if this were a fairy tale, she had cast off some spell which had kept her eternally young. Her voice, too, had grown dull and listless. She looked at him with confusion. "Why did you leave behind the list of addresses? And why my address of all things? Is it conceivable that—" And Amelia did not go on. "I left behind no addresses. The detective didn't make up the story. I don't know. I swear before God I don't know." Don't swear to God. You most certainly did make a list, and it fell out of your pocket. It's decent of you not to have excluded me." And she smiled wearily, the sort of smile one sometimes exhibits in the face of tragedy. "Really, it's a mystery. I'm beginning to doubt my own reason. Yes, you are a sick person." At that moment, what had happened all came back to him. He had ripped pages from his notebook, and from them had fashioned a cone with which to probe the keyhole. He had apparently left the cone behind, and the list had included Amelia's address. Who could tell what other addresses had been there? In that second he realized that leaving the pages had been tantamount to informing upon himself. Volsky's address might easily have been among them, as well as addresses of impresarios, actors, theater owners, and firms from which he purchased equipment. It was not improbable that his own address was included, since he liked to amuse himself at times by writing his street and number, and festooning it with hairs, appendages, tails, and flourishes. He felt no fear, but something within him laughed. His very first crime, and he had denounced himself. He belonged with those incompetents who steal nothing but leave enough clues to lead the police directly to them. The police and the courts dealt mercilessly with such fools. He remembered what Amelia had said about those who see the pit but nevertheless fall into it. He felt ashamed of his clumsiness. "This means I dare not go home. They'll learn my address in Lublin as well. Yes, and this foot in the bargain. Well," he said, "I shan't trouble you any longer. It's all up with us." And he rose to go. Amelia got up also. "Where are you going? You haven't murdered anyone? Forgive me, if you can." And Yasha began to limp towards the door. She began to move as if to block his path. "Do go and see a doctor." "Yes, thank you." It seemed as if she wanted to say something else to him, but he quickly backed into the hallway, grabbed his hat and coat, and let himself out. Amelia shouted something after him, but he slammed the door, and injured foot and all, began to race down the stairs. Chapter 8. Yasha remained standing for a while at the courtyard gate. Was a police agent waiting for him just outside? Suddenly he remembered the skeleton key. No, it was not in the suit he had on. It was in the one he had worn the day before. But if his house had been searched, then the key had been discovered. Well, it doesn't matter now. Let them lock me up. Tomorrow's newspapers will be full of me anyhow. What will Esther say when she finds out? The Piask gang will be delighted. They will consider it a fine irony. And what about Hermann and Zeftel and Magda, not to mention her brother? And how about Volsky? The crowd at the Alhambra? Anyway, I'll be taken to the prison hospital. He could feel the swelling in his foot pressing on his shoe. And I've lost Amelia as well, he said to himself. He walked through the gate, but no policeman was waiting. Perhaps the man was lurking across the street. Yasha thought of entering the Saxony Gardens, but he did not do so. Amelia, peering through her window, might see him. He walked in the direction of Granishna Street, came out on Gnoya Street again, and saw in a watchmaker's window that it was only 10 minutes to 4. God in heaven, how long this day was! It seemed like a year. He felt he must sit, and he had the notion to enter the study house again. He turned into the courtyard of the synagogue. What's happened to me, he marveled. Suddenly I've become a real synagogue Jew. In the synagogue, the evening services were in progress. A Lithuanian Jew was intoning the 18 benedictions. The worshippers were dressed in short coats and stiff hats. Yasha smiled. He was descended from Polish Hasidim. In Lublin there were scarcely any Lithuanian Jews, but here in Warsaw there were many. They dressed differently, talked differently, prayed differently. Although it was a hot day, a chill which the sun could not dissipate came from the synagogue. He heard the cantor chant, "And to Jerusalem, thy city, return in mercy, and dwell therein as thou hast spoken." So, they wish to return to Jerusalem too, Yasha said to himself. From early childhood he had considered Lithuanian Jews half-Jews, an alien sect. He could barely understand their Yiddish. He saw that there were clean-shaven men among the congregation. What was the point in shaving the beard, then praying, he asked himself. Perhaps they used scissors. That would constitute a lesser sin. But as long as one believed in God and the Torah, why compromise? If there was a God and his law was true, then he must be served night and day. How long did one survive in this rotten world? Yasha went to the study house. It was filled with people. Men studied the Talmud. The sunlight filtered through the windows and cast oblique pillars of dust. Young men with lengthy sidelocks swayed over volumes of the Talmud, shouted, chanted, prodded one another, gesticulated. One grimaced as if his stomach ached. A second wagged his thumb. A third twirled the fringes of his sash. Their shirts were grimy, their collars loosened. Some had lost their teeth prematurely. One's beard grew in black tufts, a tuft here, a tuft there. The beard of another small fellow was as red as fire, his head shaven, and from his skull hung yellow sidelocks long as braids. Yasha heard him cry, "They sued him for wheat, and he admitted barley." Can God will it thus, Yasha asked himself, all this business about wheat and barley? This knowledge concerns only commerce. He reminded himself of the cry of the anti-Semite, "The Talmud only teaches the Jew to be a swindler." This fellow probably has a little shop somewhere. If he doesn't have one now, he will someday. Yasha found an empty bench near the bookshelves. It felt good to sit down. He closed his eyes and listened to the sounds of the Torah. Shrill, adolescent voices mingled with the hoarse, rattling accents of the old. The voices shouted, mumbled, chanted, enunciated single words. Yasha recalled what Volsky had said to him once over a glass of vodka, that he, Volsky, was no anti-Semite, but that the Jew in Poland had created a bit of Baghdad in the midst of Europe. Even the Chinese and Arabs, according to Volsky, were civilized in comparison to the Jew. On the other hand, the Jews who wore short cloaks and shaved their beards were either eager to Russianize Poland or were revolutionaries. Quite often they were both exploiting and stirring up the working classes at the same time. They were radicals, Freemasons, atheists, internationalists, seeking to seize, dominate, and befoul everything. A silence descended upon Yasha. He could be considered one of these beardless Jews, but he found them more alien than the pious sort. From childhood on, he had been surrounded by religious people. Even Esther kept a Jewish home with a kosher kitchen. Such a breed was perhaps too Asiatic, as the enlightened Jews claimed, but at least they had a faith and a spiritual homeland, a history and a hope. In addition to their laws governing commerce, they had their Hasidic literature, and they studied their Kabbalah and books of ethics. But what did the assimilated Jews have? Nothing of their own. In one place they spoke Polish, in another Russian, in still others German and French. They sat around in the Café Lours, or the Café Siamodini, or the Café Strasburger, drinking coffee, smoking cigarettes, reading a variety of newspapers and magazines, and telling jokes which elicited the kind of laughter that Yasha always found unpleasant. They carried on their politics, forever planning revolutions and strikes, although the victims of these activities were always the poor Jews, their own brethren. As for their women, they gallivanted in diamonds and ostrich plumes, arousing Christian envy. It was odd, but no sooner did Yasha find himself in a house of prayer than he began taking stock of his soul. True, he had alienated himself from the pious, but he had not gone over to the camp of the assimilated. He had lost everything: Amelia, his career, his health, his home. Amelia's words returned to him. You must have some sort of a covenant with God, since he punishes you so promptly. Yes, heaven kept a sharp lookout over him. Possibly it was because he had never stopped believing. But what did they want of him? Earlier that day he had known what was required, that he keep to the path of righteousness, as had his father before him and his father's father before that. Now he was again a prey to doubts. Why did God need these capotes, these sidelocks, these skullcaps, these sashes? How many more generations would wrangle over the Talmud? How many more restrictions would the Jew put on himself? How much longer would they wait for the Messiah, they who had already waited 2,000 years? God was one thing, these man-made dogmas another. But was one able to serve God without dogmas? How had he, Yasha, come to be in his present predicament? He most certainly would not have been involved in all these love affairs and other escapades if he had put on a fringed garment and had prayed thrice daily. A religion was like an army. To operate it required discipline. An abstract faith inevitably led to sin. The prayer house was like a barracks. There God's soldiers were mustered. Yasha could remain there no longer. He felt hot, and yet he was shivering. Obviously, he had a fever. He decided to go home. Let them arrest me if they wish, he thought. He was reconciled to draining the cup to the last bitter dregs. Before leaving the study house, he took down a book from the shelves at random. Opening it to the middle, he consulted it as his father had been in the practice of doing whenever he was uncertain of his proper course of action. The volume, he discovered, was The Eternal Paths of Rabbi Leib of Praga. On the right-hand page was a verse from Scripture. He closeth his eyes not to see evil, along with the Talmudic interpretation. Such a man is one who does not look at women while they stand at their washing. Laboriously, Yasha translated the Hebrew words. He understood what they were getting at. There must be discipline. If a man did not look, he did not lust, and if he did not lust, he did not sin. But if one broke the discipline and did look, one ended by violating the seventh commandment. He had opened the book and found a text concerning the very problem which was uppermost in his mind. He put the book back. A few moments later, he took it down again and kissed it. This book, at least, required something of him, Yasha. It marked out a course of action, albeit a difficult one. But mere worldly writing demanded nothing. For all such authors cared, he could kill, steal, fornicate, destroy himself and others. He had often met literary men in cafes and theaters. They busied themselves kissing women's hands, bestowing compliments upon all and sundry, were constantly ranting against publishers and critics. He hailed a drozhki and ordered the coachman to drive him to Freta Street. He knew that Magda would make a scene, but he mentally rehearsed the words he would say to her. Magda, dear, I am dead. Take everything I own, my gold watch and diamond ring, my few rubles, and go home. If you can, forgive me. Subchapter 2. In the drozhki, Yasha felt a fear he had never previously experienced. He was afraid of something, but did not know what it was. The weather was hot, yet he felt cold. He trembled all over. His fingers had become white and shrunken, the tips shriveled like those of a mortally ill person or of a corpse. It was as if his heart were being crushed by a giant fist. What's wrong with me, he asked himself. Has my last hour come? Do I fear being arrested? Do I long for Amelia? He continued to tremble and was seized by a cramp. He could scarcely breathe. So desperate was his condition that he began to console himself. Well, not everything is lost yet. I can live without a leg, and perhaps I may find some solution. Even if I'm arrested, how long will they keep me in prison? After all, I only attempted burglary. I didn't do anything. He leaned against the back of the seat. He wanted to put up his coat collar, but he was too embarrassed to do so on such a hot day. But he did put his fingers inside his coat to warm them. What is it? Can it be gangrene? He asked himself. He wanted to untie the lace on his shoe, but when he bent over, he almost fell from the seat. The driver evidently guessed that something was wrong with his passenger and kept turning around. The pedestrians were also looking at him, Yasha noticed. Some even stopped to stare. What's wrong? The coachman anxiously asked. Shall I stop?